As you have probably established, I am not an open source maintainer. I do have a couple of open repos, I do get involved in various project bug trackers and things like that, but that is not my main thing. But recently I came across this 2017 blog post from someone who is. This is written by Nolan Lawson, a developer on things like PouchDB, LWC, Pinafore before this went unmaintained, and various other little projects out there, all of which have had a fairly constant stream of issues and pull requests being made. This is titled, What It Feels Like to Be an Open Source Maintainer, and I thought it'd be fun to go over a lot of his main points and see what the experience is really like. If you want to go and read the entire thing, I'll leave it linked in the description down below. Outside your door stands a line of 100 people. They are patiently waiting for you to answer their questions, complaints, pull requests, and feature requests. You want to help them all, but for now, you're putting it off. Maybe you had a hard day at work, or you're tired, or you're just trying to enjoy a weekend with your family and friends. But if you go to github.com/notifications, there's a constant reminder of how many people are waiting. It's very important to remember that while there are absolutely people in the FOSS space that are employed to do this work, most people are not. Maybe they get a couple of donations here and there on GitHub sponsors, Coffee, Patreon, things like that, but for the vast majority of people in this space, they are doing it as volunteer work. And when someone is a volunteer, you cannot expect them to get back to you instantly. Maybe it'll take a couple of days, maybe it'll take a couple of weeks, maybe it'll take a couple of months. Depending on the size of the project and how many people are working on it, maybe your problem isn't that important and is just going to sit there for a really long time. And this is just the way it's going to be. Most developers out there aren't going to give their open source project 16 hours of the day. There is only so much time that can be spent working on these projects. So when you manage to find some spare time, you open the door to the first person. They're well-meaning enough. They tried to use your project, but ran into some confusion over the API. They've pasted their code into a GitHub comment, but they forgot or didn't know how to format it, so their code is a big unreadable mess. Helpfully, you edit their comment to add a code block so that it is nicely formatted, but it's still a lot of code to read. Also, their description of the problem is a bit hard to understand. Maybe this person doesn't speak English as a first language, or maybe they have a disability that makes it difficult for them to communicate via writing. You're not sure. Either way, you struggle to understand the paragraphs of text they've posted. Now, the author is trying to be nice here. The other possibility is they're an idiot, or they are just trying to waste your time, because you will run into these people every so often, especially when there's any sort of controversy around a repo. You're going to see a lot of these issues, a lot of these pull requests, which are an absolute joke and shouldn't even be considered. But in a general day-to-day basis, this seems like a reasonably sensible way to approach it. The next person in line has a frown on their face. They spew out complaints about how your project wasted 2 hours of their life because a certain API didn't work as advertised. Their vitriol gives you a bad feeling in the pit of your stomach. You don't waste a lot of time with this person, you simply say, this is an open source project and is maintained by volunteers. If there's a bug in the code, please submit a reproducible test case or a PR. To be fair, this is probably nicer than I would be. I would just ban you from the project if you're going to be an ass. Like, if you're going to show up my bug tracker and just insult me, I want nothing to do with you. I don't care if you even have a legitimate problem. That's just not what we're going to do here. The next person has run into a very common error with an easy workaround. You know you've seen this error a few times before, but you can't quite recall where the solution was posted. Stack Overflow, the wiki, the mailing list. After a few minutes of Googling, you paste a link and close the issue. This is a big problem I've noticed in a lot of issue trackers. A lot of people out there will use the issue tracker as a replacement for doing their own research. When you ask someone a question that's explained on the wiki, explained on Stack Overflow, explained somewhere out there on the internet, they are going to provide you the same information that you would get if you just searched for it yourself. The issue tracker is not the place for this kind of discussion. If there's like a Slack, a Discord, things like that, that's different. But don't use the issue tracker for that. But it seems pretty clear to me this dev was trying to be as helpful as possible rather than many of the other projects out there that will just send you away. But not everyone is just submitting bug reports, submitting issues, and things like that. Some people are trying to submit a pull request and submit new code. The next person is a regular contributor. You recognize their name from various community forums and sibling projects. They run into an esoteric issue and proposed a pull request to fix it. Unfortunately, the issue is complicated, and so their PR contains many paragraphs of prose explaining it. You're tempted to just say, "looks good to me," and merge the pull request. But you've been burned by that before. In the past, you've merged a PR without fully evaluating it, and in the end, it led to new headaches because of problems you failed to foresee. Maybe the test passed, but the performance is degraded by a factor of 10, or maybe it introduced a memory leak, or maybe the PR made the project too confusing for new users because it excessively complicated the API surface. Even though you are the one maintaining a project, you may not have all of the requisite knowledge to understand every single little thing that could possibly be changed with it. Especially if this is a fairly new project for you, you're a new developer and things like that. There are cases where something is going to happen and you just don't have the time or have the knowledge to properly understand what someone is trying to do with that project. Now, in some cases, these PRs might just be rejected outright. In other cases, though, it's put the developer into a situation where maybe they merge it, maybe they don't. Maybe we'll try to find some time for it later and let it sit for a bit, because if it's an esoteric problem that one person is having and they've patched it, maybe it's okay to just sit here for a couple of weeks. The next person in line has found a new bug, but it's not actually a new bug. You know that it's actually a bug in a sibling project. They're saying that this is blocking them from shipping their app. You know it's a big problem, but it's one of many, and you don't have time to fix it right now. You respond that this looks like a genuine issue, but it's more appropriate to open in another repo. So you close their issue and copy it into the other repo. Then add a comment suggesting where they might look in the code to start fixing it. You doubt they'll actually do so though. Very few do. Most people, when they're reporting a bug in a FOSS project, are not going to be the ones to fix it. There are obviously exceptions when the person reporting a bug is already a developer on that project, but when you are just a regular user, when you're a developer of another project relying on a project, you're probably not going to have the time to do so, or if you're just a regular user, even the knowledge of where to start, even if you're told where in the codebase the problem is. And the next person is basically just wasting your time. They say, "What's the status on this?" You're not sure what they're talking about, so you look at the context. You'll also see people saying ping, upvote, +1, things like that. This is especially common on ancient issues that have just recently got a bit of extra attention, but people who've discovered it don't really have anything useful to add. There are more than 20 comments on this particular issue, and it would take you a long time to read through them all to jog your memory. So you merely respond, "Sorry, this issue has been open for a while, but nobody has tackled it yet. We're still trying to understand the scope of the problem. A pull request could be a good start." Which is, once again, a very nice response. A lot of projects I've seen will just ban people if they start saying upvote +1, what's the status on this, because it's not helpful to the discussion. It just adds extra noise for no reason whatsoever. But sometimes things go well. The next person has opened a pull request, but it's on a repo that's fairly active, and so another maintainer is already providing feedback. You glance through the thread, you trust the other maintainer to handle this one, so you mark it as read, and just move on with your day. It's always nice when there are other people that can actually help you out with things, but a lot of projects out there, even projects that are relatively popular, only have one actual maintainer, and then random other people that will show up, once every so often. In a sense, these GitHub notifications are a constant stream of negativity about your projects. Nobody opens an issue or a pull request when they're satisfied with your work. Honestly, if they did that, that would be really annoying, so please do not do that. Use the forum, use the Discord and other things to leave your appreciation. They only do so when they found something lacking. Even if you only spend a little bit of time reading through the notifications, it can be mentally and emotionally exhausting. You could take a break. In fact, you've probably earned it by now. In the past, you've even taken vacations of a week or two from GitHub, just for your own mental health. But you know that that's exactly how you ended up in this situation, with hundreds of people patiently waiting. If you had just kept on top of your GitHub notifications, you'd probably have a more manageable 20 to 30 to deal with per day. Instead, you let them pile up. So now there are hundreds and you feel guilty. Honestly, procrastination is going to invade anything in your life, whether it's something you enjoy doing, whether it's something you don't enjoy doing, like university work, something like that. You're always going to procrastinate it, and it's going to come back to bite you over time. As nice as it would be to be able to keep on top of things all the time, life things happen, and when you're not doing this full time, life takes priority. In the past, for one reason or another, you've really let issues pile up. You might have seen an issue that was left unanswered for months. Usually when you go back to address such an issue, the person who opened it never responds. Or they respond by saying, "I fixed my problem by abandoning your project and using another one instead." That makes you feel bad, but you understand their frustration. A lot of people out there completely forget that developers are people too. They are just trying to make a project, and sometimes things slip through the cracks. It's one thing to be critical, that's totally fair. It's another thing to just be outright mean for no reason whatsoever. But maybe a lot of this can be dealt with by attracting new contributors. Labeling can help. For instance, you might label issues as needs reproducing or has test case or good first patch. The good first patch ones can be especially helpful since they often attract new contributors. However, you've noticed that often the only issues that attract new contributors are the very easy ones. The updating documentation, the addressing a little function, things like that. The ones where the effort to document the issue and explain how to fix it outweighs the effort to just fix it yourself. You create some of these issues because you know it's a worthy goal to get new people involved in open source, and you feel good when the pull request author tells you, "This was my first contribution to an open source project." But for a lot of people, that one contribution is their one and only contribution. You know it's very unlikely that they'll ever come back. Usually these folks don't become regular contributors or maintainers, so you wonder if you did something wrong, if there's something more you could have done to onboard new maintainers and help lighten your load. In some cases, yes, but when it's related to things like Hacktoberfest, for example, where people will go around submitting pull requests to random projects because they want to win a shirt, there's not really much that can be done there. Those people were never going to stick around. But sometimes attracting new people does work. One of your projects is nearly self-sustaining. You haven't touched it in years, but there's a group of maintainers who respond to every issue in PR so you don't have to. You're enormously grateful to these maintainers, but you have no idea what you did to get so many contributors to this project, whereas other projects wind up as your responsibility and yours alone. Is whether the project is useful to other people and other people actually get attached to it. If it's some random thing that addresses your use case and your use case alone, maybe it'll happen, but it's very unlikely. But if we're talking about a window manager like Awesome WM, like Qtile, like Hyperland, other projects like this, over time, they are going to develop some form of developer base because there are a lot of users who are interested in the project as well. But even so, it doesn't happen every time. And this can be especially true if we're talking about a very competitive space. Let's say text editors, for example. There are some really established text editors, and it's very difficult to get people interested in something else. Maybe you can, but it's definitely going to be an uphill battle. So you're reluctant to create new projects because you know it'll just increase your maintenance burden. In fact, there's a perverse effect where the more successful you are, the more you get punished with GitHub notifications. Punished as in people care about your project, so you're just going to have more and more stuff to sift through. You can still recall the thrill of creation, the joy of writing a new project from scratch and solving previously unsolved problems. But now you weigh that joy against the knowledge that any new project will necessarily steal time from old projects or steal time from the rest of your life depending on how well you are at managing things. You wonder if it's time to deprecate one of your old repos or mark it as unmaintained, which is what was done with this project over here. Now, realistically, a project can be maintained until the end of time. There's always going to be little tweaks you can make here and there, even if nothing really needs to change, even if that project is in basically a feature-complete state. And for projects like that, there is nothing wrong as marking them as archived, marking them as unmaintained, and just leaving them out there. Yeah, a lot of people are going to say, oh, if the project's not maintained, the project is dead, the project is unusable. But that's not necessarily the case. If the project is unmaintained, it's still going to work as it's worked before until any dependency issues start to crop up. So you wonder how much longer you can do this before you just burn out. You've considered doing open source as your day job, but from talking with folks who actually do open source for a living, you know this usually means permission to work on a specific open source project as your day job. And that doesn't really help you that much because you have dozens of projects across various domains which are all vying for your time. Most people doing open source for a job are doing it through a company. They are working for Red Hat doing kernel development. They are working for Critter, working on Critter and things like that. Most people aren't doing things independently through a Patreon and things like that. If you do have that set up, then you can absolutely just do what you want. The issue is building that up over time. It's not something you just apply for and jump into straight away. But what you want most of all is to have more projects that maintain themselves. Obviously, they're not maintaining themselves, but you're not the one doing it. You try to follow all the best practices, you have a contributing.md and a code of conduct, you enthusiastically hand out owner privileges to anyone who submits a high quality PR. It's exhausting to do this for every project though, so you're not as diligent as you wish you could be. And signing it off, I've already told my partner that if and when we decide to start having kids, I will probably quit open source for good. I just can't see how I'll be able to make the time for both raising a family and doing open source. I anticipate that ultimately this will be the solution to my problem, the nuclear option. I just hope that it comes in a positive form, like starting a new chapter of my life, and not in a negative form, like unceremoniously burning out. Now, this might sound, a bit melodramatic, and the author is, keenly aware of this. If you want to see another take on this matter, there was a response written to this by Michael Rogers called Time to Leave. This is also absolutely worth a read, and this will be linked in the description down below. And there is a response to that by Jan Lendart, Sustainable Open Source, The Maintainer's Perspective, or How I Learned to Stop Caring and Love Open Source. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Are you an open source maintainer? Do you have a small project with, a couple of things here and there? Do you work on a really big project that has hundreds of issues being made? I would love to know. Or are you just, a random user who's just intrigued by how things come together? Let me know. So if you like this video, go and like the video. And if you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe, Steadily Veripay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and FOSS is good. I actually didn't have a better outro. I'm out.